Okay, we certainly still have a lot farther to go to get GPU prices exactly where we want them to be, but we have seen a lot of downward movement, which is good. Last night, I posted on my community page where I monitor price drops that I find that the RTX 4080 was available on Newegg for as low as $999.99. It did finally cross that $1,000 barrier. Although as of right now, the immediately available stock at that price had dried up and it was available for back ordering at that price. So it does show that a lot of people were, I guess, waiting for that $1,000 mark on their 4080, although I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of other people are waiting for, $800 or $900 to feel a lot better about the price. Now, from AMD, we also saw the 7900 XT, which had recently dropped as low as $720, now have a promo code on Newegg, dropping it as low as $705. This was a promo code that you had to apply in cart, but it did drop off an extra $15. Now, the 7900 XT is a massive comeback in value proposition, given that it launched at $900 at a price point where it was just panned in reviews. It was only $100 less expensive than the better 7900 XTX model, being a worse value, performance per dollar than the flagship model is usually, not a good look. But yeah, coming down to right around $700. Again, I think a lot of people feel like, that $700, maybe $650. A lot of people feel like this really should have been called a 7800 XT rather than a 7900 XT, given its, performance and positioning in the lineup. All of that. Now, it'll be nice to see if we get some further price drops going into Prime Day coming here in July. And speaking of Prime Day, a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Flexispot. A while back, my wife got a new classroom, and oh man, look at this disgusting mess of a desk they gave her. And Flexispot helped out by upgrading her to a beautiful new standing desk. The adjustability has paid off. She can stand up while she's using it in the classroom. She can sit down for lunch. She can even bring it down to the usable height of the preschoolers in her classroom. And the only problem has been how jealous the other teachers at her school have been. Well, Flexispot is coming through to upgrade one of her co-teachers to the new Comhar EW8Y standing desk. She selected the 48-inch bamboo white with the neon lights that you can also purchase separately. The kids absolutely love these things. They're so cool. One of the best things about this desk is that it has a drawer as well as a USB charging station, in addition to the excellent, steady, stable, adjustable standing height, which again has been so useful in the classroom. And the best deal of all is that with the Amazon Prime Day sale, you can get up to 32% off Flexispot desks. And if you want to purchase this particular model, use the link in the pinned comment and video description, and you can get extra 5% off by using the code COMHARDESK. Now, a lot of the GPU deals I post are US only deals, and that is what I monitor the most closely. And I get comments like, what about the rest of the world? We're not seeing any price drops. Well, videocards.com, and links to everything I talk about today will be in the video description. Videocards.com has posted that European retailers slashed the prices of the RTX 4060, now 6% cheaper in less than a week. Now, this appears to be at Mind Factory in Germany, but also a French retailer, Hardware.fr. These marking down the 4060 to 310 euros and 309 euros, respectively, coming down from a launch price of 329 euros. And not only that, we're also seeing another article from videocards.com saying that the RX 7600 and RTX 4060 Ti and 4060 non-Ti already marked down 10% cheaper in Spain. This looks to be the retailer CoolMod. And the overall pricing breakdown is the 4060 Ti had an MSRP in Spain at 449 euros. It's now listed as low as 399.95 euros. The 4060 non-Ti had an MSRP at 335 euros in Spain, down to 299.95. And the RX 7600 from AMD had an MSRP of 299 euros in Spain and is now listed at 259.94. So it's nice to see prices moving down. Now, on these particular models, these are 8GB cards. So I think there's a couple of problems here. There's the price not being what people want, but also people not being real excited about 8GB graphics cards. Now, Nvidia is scheduled to launch a 16GB 4060 Ti in July. We knew that much. And now we're getting a rumored / leaked launch date of July 18th. So this is not official yet, although this is coming from Megasize GPU on Twitter, who has had a reliable track record, including recently, on things like this. So I would expect this to be accurate, although again, this is a leak / rumor. Looks like this is the availability date for partners, add-in cards, retailers, resellers, system builders, OEMs, all of that, begin taking orders and shipping on July 18th at 6 a.m. Pacific. No rumor on when the reviews would be available, although the general pattern does seem to be reviews available a day before the availability to customers. Now, it'll be interesting to see if this goes any differently, as it's a kind of a 16GB version of the 4060 Ti. This will certainly be interesting to test. Now, the real problem here with this is that Nvidia did announce this at $499, which means that it's gonna be a hard sell, because like I said, with all these other cards being discounted, part of it is that they didn't like the 8GB of VRAM, but the other part of it was the prices were high. This solves one of those two problems, but it makes the other one worse. It costs $100 more than the 4060 Ti with 8GB. And so really, I think we should have just got, if they wanted to charge $400 for this card, it should have been the 16GB version at $400, not $100 more for another 8GB of VRAM. Because it's going to put a shit into competition with cards like the 6800 XT and things like that, which are significantly, well, I mean, we'll need to review it, but I would imagine would perform significantly better, and also have 16GB of VRAM, and you've been available to buy it for a long time now. But anyway, interested to test these things out, and again, the rumored date is July 18th. Now, speaking of the RTX 4060, this is the non-Ti, I always look forward to, let me make myself tiny and out of the way, to 3dcenter.org doing some follow-up coverage where they do a meta-analysis of a massive number of GPU reviews at launch. So that's what this is for the RTX 4060, which in all these performance figures here are set at 100%. Now, what are we seeing here? We see a whole bunch of reviews: Computer Base, eTechnics, Hardware & Co., Hardware Upgrade, Kit Guru, LTT, blah, 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 all listed here. And then you see their competitor GPUs, like the 6600, 7600, 6700 XT, 4060 Ti, 4070, A750, all of that lined up against it and showing their performance, the average result from these reviewers, and then as a percentage of the performance of the RTX 4060. And then down here, we get the averages. So this is of all of these reviews, with a geomean kind of weighting the reviewers who ran more tests heavier than the ones who ran fewer tests. Anyway, interesting data to look at, because now we see the 4060, again, set at 100% baseline. We see that the 3060 Ti, on average in this massive data set, which helps, control for outliers and all of that and give us a good big picture result, on average, the 3060 Ti is 9.5% faster than the 4060. Now, of course, the 4060 draws less power, has frame generation and AV1 encoding, but it's really not a good look if your 4060 not only can't beat the 3060 Ti, but the 3060 Ti is 9.5% faster. The 3060 12GB reaching 83.5% of the performance of the 4060, and the 4060 Ti 21.8% faster, and the 4070 57% faster than the 4060. That is a massive performance jump. Looking at some AMD competition, the 6700 XT has been a pretty close price competitor, at least on the cheapest models in the United States, and that came out on average 13.3% faster than the 4060. And the RX 7600 from AMD, which is the current newest generation competitor from AMD, although priced significantly lower, coming in at 97.8% of the rasterized performance. Now, these are the rasterized performance results. They did also aggregate, do an aggregate the same way for ray tracing performance, where once again the 3060 Ti was faster than the 4060 by over 9% with ray tracing, the 4060 Ti pulling ahead to 24.6%, and now the 4070 is now 66.5% faster than the 4060. One big advantage here being that ray tracing does often spill over 8 gigabytes of VRAM, and the 4070 has 12 gigabytes, and that could be adding to why it's pulling even further ahead when we look at ray tracing performance. Here, the AMD GPUs don't stack up as well, again, in ray tracing, so the value proposition there is going to depend a lot on how much you anticipate yourself using ray tracing, and I've done a lot of detailed head-to-head comparisons myself where you can see that it depends a lot on how heavy the ray tracing workload is in the particular game that you're testing. But anyway, this gives a pretty good idea of where we're at here. Now, they do an also interesting performance, a street price valuation here, and then you can look at performance per dollar and all of that. But again, these are European pricing, and I believe this is a German, 3D Center is in Germany, so it's probably focusing on that, would be my guess here. So value will depend by region, but anyway, interesting results, and again, this will be linked in the video description if you want to take a closer look at it. Now, just this morning, right before I filmed it, reviews popped up for the new CPU, the 5600 X3D, and I was able to watch Gamers Nexus review at 2x speed right before filming this video to give you guys some thoughts. This is just one of the games available. I recommend watching the full review just to give you a rough idea without stealing the whole review from Gamers Nexus here. But just to kind of confirm that, as expected, the 5600 X3D, which is the 6-core AM4 part, which is kind of being added in fairly late here and only sold at Micro Center in limited availability here. Basically, these are 5800 X3D chips, 8-core 16-thread, which is an 8-core 16-thread chip, where it just was faulty. It couldn't be sold as a 5800 X3D, but they could get 6 working cores available on the 5600 X3D here. And as you can see here, in some games, the slightly higher clocks and extra couple cores on the 5800 X3D does make it overall a better gaming CPU, but the increased V-cache does mean it's often trading blows with the cards like the 7600 X from AMD and is beating cards like the 5600X, which is the non-3D V-cache card, from AMD's 5000 series. This CPU is definitely the most interesting when thought of as a drop-in upgrade if you already have the AM4 platform. But the 5800 X3D has already lowered in price significantly to the point where it might make more sense just to grab the top chip available for your AM4 platform. And if you're building new, it might make more sense to just go with the newer AM5 platform from AMD with something like the R5 7600. However, the overall platform will be more expensive, and Micro Center is offering these in bundle deals with some motherboards and RAM for a pretty low price. Although, again, you're buying into an older platform, so you won't have the future upgradability that you would get going with the new 7000 series. My feeling here is this is in a bit of a no man's land, just because if you're upgrading your AM4 platform, you might want to just spring for the extra $50 or so to get the 5800 X3D, have the best gaming chip available on the platform. And if you're just looking for a bang for the buck upgrade, CPUs like the 5600 non-X3D are still going to be a great upgrade for somebody on like a 2600 or 3600 for gaming, or even lower than that. But are currently available for around $130, $140, which is significantly less than the 5600 X3D. Anyway, I recommend watching the full reviews, and if you don't live near a Micro Center, it's all kind of a moot point anyway. Now, while we would have expected the AM4 platform to just be done already, and then that one was already a surprise, Videocards.com is reporting that Gigabyte's motherboard pages are listing a Ryzen 3 5100 chip as supported on some motherboards, which would be interesting. Getting a 4-core chip here that nobody was really expecting at this point. We weren't really expecting anything else to be added to this. Now, again, this is not an official announcement from AMD. This is just listed as support on a Gigabyte motherboard page, so just interesting to note. And another interesting to note and not officially announced CPU news, this time on the AM5 platform, is a Ryzen 5 7500F. Apparently launching soon, according to a Korean retailer, and benchmarks of this chip already up on Puget Bench. So lending credence to this maybe actually existing, Ryzen 5 7500F. Now, what is this? It seems to be basically a 7600, 6-core chip from the 7000 series, but without the integrated RDNA 2 graphics, which would mean that the F would be kind of following Intel's strategy of the F indicating the non-integrated GPU version of a part. So videocards.com would place this, in the product stack. We know that the 7600 is a $229 launch price CPU already, with an integrated GPU, and this would be coming in with a slight downgrade to the boost clock. And we don't know the pricing yet or anything like that. It would be missing the iGPU. So if it came in at a low enough price, I guess that could be interesting. We'll have to see what comes in, how it does end up coming out. And one more piece of AMD CPU news, we do see the Ryzen 9 7950 X3D, which is the 16-core part where one half of it, 8 cores, have the 3D V cache for gaming performance. The other half doesn't, but you don't really need the other 8 cores in gaming, but can help you out in productivity. The top-end chip is apparently getting a bit of a price cut, as reported by videocards.com here. Looks like it's dropping to $557 after coupon codes and at both Amazon and Newegg. Again, it'll be interesting to see if we see anything else happening around Prime Day. Now let's jump into some Intel GPU news. We're seeing ASRock quietly launching a low-profile Arc A380 graphics card, which I believe does just feed power off of the PCIe interface. So this form factor could be interesting, even if the performance level of this GPU isn't anything to get too excited about. Now, it does seem to still take up 2 slots in the width, but it is a low profile, or would that be height technically? I forget which way counts as width and height in GPUs. Anyway, whatever. I believe it still does take up 2 slots, but so it won't fit in the smallest of small form factors, but being a low profile card and drawing just off of the PCIe slot for power is certainly going to interest some builders, I'm sure. Now, in more Intel GPU news, we're seeing an article from Tom's Hardware here reporting Intel strives to make path tracing usable on integrated GPUs. Now, I was just thinking to myself, wait, what? Okay, so path tracing is the even more demanding version of ray tracing, more fully simulating the light bounce around the scene. But iGPUs, really? Now, this article keeps mentioning this in terms of iGPUs. When I clicked the actual Intel article, well, they do mention Intel's iGPUs. I think really what this is getting at more is just, it's talking about just efficiency boosts to path tracing through new techniques that they're talking about, which certainly sound interesting. But it seems to not be quite as focused on making path tracing work on iGPUs as the Tom's Hardware article seemed to be. It does say these are important components to make photorealistic rendering with path tracing available on more affordable GPUs, such as Intel Arc GPUs, right? And a step toward real-time performance on integrated GPUs. So, right, and a step toward it in iGPUs, right? So anyway, I think the actual Intel piece here was a little more interesting and fair, that this isn't saying we're suddenly getting iGPUs running path tracing. It's more just about making it run on less powerful GPUs in general. Now, how about that power connector on Nvidia GPUs that has still occasionally been getting reports of burning up? Well, over at Igor's lab, he says secret change to the sense pins starting from the GeForce RTX 4070 Fe, and no one noticed it. So he's showing that if you compare the sense pins on the 4070 versus the 4080, the 4070 pins are seated further back. Which should mean that these sense pins don't engage until the GPU is more fully seated compared to the original design. Now, again, the original design causing the GPU's connector to melt is, has been agreed upon to be, user error. It's not fully seated, but that doesn't mean that the user error can't be contributed to by a design flaw, which makes user error more likely to happen and doesn't, do anything to stop melting happening when it's not fully seated, right? Could you do that in the design? Well, that seems to probably be the advantage of seating these further back, would be that the sense pins would not engage until it's more fully connected. Seems to be a good change, although apparently it was happening without much fanfare here. But anyway, I'll link this article in the description if you are interested. Now, not quite computer hardware, but certainly something that I think a lot of people following my channel could be interested in. Nintendo Switch 2 dev kits rumored to be in the hands of a Spanish studio and coming from a leaker who has got things accurate in the past. This could certainly be interesting. I really think we do need a Switch 2. I keep almost buying a Switch OLED to upgrade my original Switch, but then I'm just like, I need to just wait for the Switch 2. Anyway, I did try to dig into whether I could find any information on the hardware in the Switch 2. Now, this is a fairly old leak, but I haven't found anything that seems to contradict it or supplant it. Where we did see, this is a post over on Reddit, but an Nvidia employee has confirmed the existence of the Tegra 239 chip, which has been rumored since 2021 as being developed for the next generation Nintendo Switch. As comment saying, adding support for Tegra 239 SoC, which has 8 cores in a single cluster. Also moving num cluster to SoC data to avoid over-allocating memory for 4 clusters always. Our favorite GPU leaker, Copite7Kimi, also asserted NVIDIA will be using a modified version of its T234 Orin chip for the next generation Switch. And this would be, the T239 SoC would be an 8-core CPU, likely ARM Cortex-A78C or A78, and an Ampere-based GPU that could incorporate some Lovelace features, and the next generation graphics API containing references to DLSS 2.2 and RT support. Now again, this was from many months ago, but that's our current info on what sort of hardware we might be seeing. I couldn't find anything more up to date than this. I certainly would be interested in DLSS running on a Nintendo Switch. Especially for running, imagine in docked mode, actually getting a reasonable, 1080p to 4K upscale on Switch stuff in docked mode. That would certainly be interesting to me. But anyway, let's move on to a bit of other console hardware news. Microsoft has reportedly only sold 21 million Xbox Series X and S consoles. Now, to put that in context, the PS5 has sold nearly 40 million, and the Nintendo Switch sitting at almost 127 million. Definitely putting Microsoft in last place out of those three. Now, for me personally, as a PC gamer, I'm definitely least interested in the Xbox consoles because their exclusives come to PC, which I think is great. But that means that, I did eventually buy a PS5 and a Switch to play some exclusives, and the Switch is useful for its form factor and things like that. Whereas I still just don't really have a reason to buy an Xbox if I have a good gaming PC. So anyway, let's move on to a little more console hardware news with a PlayStation 5 Slim model will apparently release later this year for $399, although this is not official. Most of all of these leaks here are coming from the court documents related to Microsoft's attempted acquisition of Activision Blizzard. So, anyway, so the leaked from the court documents that say a PlayStation likewise sells a less expensive digital edition for $399.99 and is expected to release a PS5 Slim later this year at the same reduced price point. So expected, but again, that's not an official announcement or anything like that. Now, AMD is rumored to bundle Starfield with its Ryzen 7000 CPUs. Now, we had already seen AMD announce an exclusive partnership with Starfield, but it wasn't clear at that time whether that meant there would be some kind of a game bundle deal with AMD hardware. This doesn't appear to be officially announced, but it seems to have been accidentally leaked by Newegg, by someone finding a Newegg page listing AMD Starfield game bundle promotion store, where you see all these AM5 CPUs, so the Ryzen 7000 series CPUs, apparently being listed as part of that game bundle store. So this could maybe not be official, and we don't have any official dates on this or anything like that, but it certainly seems to be the case. Now, again, this AMD partnership has been met with some dismay, talking about its, does this mean that we won't get DLSS in Starfield? Now, I did one of the early videos on that, and there has been more information coming from Gamers Nexus, looking for a quote from AMD on, are they blocking DLSS from Starfield? Hardware Unboxed has now, just a day or two ago here, done a video talking about this as well and seeing if they could get a more general statement from AMD. When a partnership agreement is signed, does AMD block or restrict game developers from integrating technology from their competitors, such as Nvidia, with DLSS? And even to that more general question, as well as just asking if they wanted to clarify the statement they originally made to WCCF Tech or anything like that, still getting a no comment, leading Hardware Unboxed, along with myself and Gamers Nexus and many others, to conclude that this certainly points to AMD doing the blocking that they are failing to deny, because it would certainly be a good PR move if they weren't blocking things to just say they weren't blocking things. And they continue to get opportunities to do that and not take advantage of them. Now, on a related note, a Nixxes graphics programmer has been quoted as saying that, look, NVIDIA DLSS, AMD FSR, and Intel XeSS can be easily supported at the same time. A lot of people defending AMD or the game developers not implementing DLSS are just saying it's just AMD's FSR supports all platforms, all GPU vendors, and so, it's just too much work to support the other ones. But again, this game developer from Nixxes, who, does like the Marvel Spider-Man ports to PC from PlayStation 5, as well as many other things, say, we have a relatively trivial wrapper around DLSS, FSR2, and XeSS. All three APIs are so similar nowadays, there's really no excuse. And then there's major games coming out in Unreal Engine where it really is just a plugin. I mean, obviously you can do a little bit of tweaking and quality control and all of that, but certainly for major AAA games like Starfield, which should be one of the biggest launches of the year, it would be nice if they could support all of those technologies for everybody to use the best one available on their GPU brand of choice. Now, let's get into some GPU cooler news, starting with, if you want to spend $120,000 US, you could get a RTX 4090 Ti/Titan cooler prototype. So not even the GPU itself. But we had seen lots of leaks with these massive coolers, sometimes leaked as a 4090 Ti cooler, sometimes as a Titan card, that kind of a thing. Well, we see one up on a used part site in China, I believe, listed at 88888. Honestly, guys, this kind of feels like a placeholder price to me, more just for the fun of putting it up there. But hey, I guess if you have around $120,000 US, which is the conversion of that you could get yourself a cooler for collectability's sake. Now, if your budget is a little lower than $120K for a cooler that doesn't include a GPU, maybe you'd be interested in Colorful launching the RTX 4060 Meow GPU featuring Ninja Cat. This is an RTX 4060, so the pricing should be a little bit less than 120,000 US dollars. So you do have that going for you. And not to be outdone, Sapphire reveals an RX 6500 XT. Yeah, 6500 XT Polar Elves GPU with a white PCB. I don't see the elves, but it is white, so polar at least makes sense. And then we have a new world record. Asus GeForce RTX 4090 breaks the 4 GHz GPU overclocking barrier for the first time. Now, the overclocker Sens had just hit 3,975 megahertz using a 4090 from Colorful, but then immediately afterwards, Splave hit 4,000 megahertz, being the first GPU to do so, and this is using an Asus RTX 4090 ROG Matrix GPU, and it only had to go to, more than 1,000 watts to do so. Didn't get the exact specifics on that, but hey, we have finally broken 4 gigahertz. Now, don't expect to be doing that at home during gaming, but it's certainly interesting to see. And I'll end on this interesting note. The PSVR2 apparently can be used on PC, but will require additional hardware due to the headset's design. So, I guess you would pronounce this Ivory, although that's a clever use of VR in the middle of that, so not sure if I'm supposed to pronounce it differently in some way, which is the developer behind the driver by the same name that made it possible to use the original PSVR on PC, has tweeted that the PSVR2, he says, well, and we're in. PSVR2 was blocking VR modes by saying it couldn't do DSC, I think that's display stream compression. He was able to modify an AMD open source Linux GPU driver to force DSC, and now we know how to put the PSVR2 into VR mode, so we can design some hardware to do it on Windows. So can the PSVR2 be used on PC? Yes, but it sounds like there's going to be a lot more work and hardware involved to make that actually a realistic thing to get into normal use as a PC VR headset. Hope you guys found all of this news interesting and useful. Hopefully we continue to see prices drop. And I'm going to get to doing some more benchmarks. I have some more comparisons I want to do on the 4060, maybe with the Intel Arc GPUs. But I did benchmark a bunch of other GPUs, including high-end ones. I am interested in the 7900 XT. At $700, it's now splitting the difference between the 4070 and the 4070 Ti, which are both still at $600 and $800 respectively. So it might be interesting to look at a three-way head-to-head comparison of 4070, 7900 XT, and 4070 Ti. But also, with this price coming down to around $700, it might be interesting to revisit. The 6950 XT has been going as low as like $580 recently. So maybe even looking at 6950 XT versus 7900 XT. I don't know. What sort of GPU head-to-head comparison videos are you guys interested in? I know eventually we'll be getting the 16 gigabyte 4060 Ti. For me to definitely play around with, and it'll be fun to look at that one in VRAM heavy games and all that. Anyway, hope you guys all have an excellent day.